So I'm multiplying two binomials using the FOIL method. I mean, if I distributed, I would go x to x, then x to 6, then 5 to x, and 5 to 6. Well, that just happens to be the FOIL method. First, x times x plus outer 6 times x plus inner 5 times x plus last 5, oops, good thing I have another pencil here, 5 times 6. So x times x, x squared. X times 6, 6x. 5 times x, 5x. 5 times 6, 30. And we notice that the middle terms combine. X squared plus 11x plus 30. And I just wanted to show you all the different things can happen. Notice that 5 times 6 is 30, and 5 plus 6 is 11. Because that's what's happening. They're getting combined for the middle term, added, and they're getting multiplied for that last term, 30. What happens if they're both negative? X times x is x squared. Then I do my outer, negative 6x. Then I do my inner, negative 5x. Then I do my last, and negative times a negative is a positive. So I get x squared minus 11x plus 30. But again, these two terms add, a negative 5 plus a negative 6, add to give me my middle term, and multiply a negative times a negative to give me my last term. And then finally, what if one of them is negative and one of them is positive? What happens? The 6 could be positive and the 5 could be negative, but I'm just going to give you one example of each. So x times x, x squared. X times negative 6, negative 6x. 5 times x, and then 5 times negative 6. Well, this time the 6 is negative, the 5 is positive, so I get x squared minus x minus 30. So if I know this last term was a negative, then my outer and my inner have to be, one has to be negative and one has to be positive. So in this case, they end up subtracting, and it's the difference between these two. So x squared minus x minus 30. Same thing with x plus 7, x plus 2, x squared, 2x, 7x gives me 9x, 7 times 2 is 14, right? X squared, 2x, 7x gives me 9x, 7 times 2 is 14. X times x, x squared. My outer term is going to be a negative 2x, my inner term is going to be a negative 7x, that's going to give me a negative 9x, and then a negative 7 times a negative 2 is a positive 14. So here we are, they were both positive, plus 9x plus 14. They were both negative, negative 9x, but still a positive 14, because when you multiply two negatives. And then here they're opposites, so we're going to get x times x is x squared. My outer term is going to be positive 2. My inner term is going to be negative 7, so that's going to give me a negative 5x, and then minus my last term, minus 14. So if you can start to move a little quicker, that's awesome. If not, write it out like you did before. Write each first, outer, inner, last. But again, you can see this idea of them combining. And then what happens when they're opposites? They subtract. And then this number is negative. I also wanted to just kind of toss this one out at you. What happens if x has a coefficient in front of it? Well, it's just 6x times x plus my outer, 6x times 3, plus my inner, and then plus my last, which is going to be a negative 3. Negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. So 6x plus 18x minus x minus 3. These two combine. Oops. 6x times x is x squared. Made a little snafu there. So 6x squared plus 17x minus 3. The last thing I want to talk about is this idea of special products. So here's x plus 5 times x plus 5, which can be written as x plus 5 squared. I'm multiplying x plus 5 by itself. So what happens? X squared, 5x, 5x, 10x, 5 times 5, 25. So the pattern that they want you to see is that this number out front is just x squared. The number in the middle is this number times 2, and the number at the end is this number squared. I'm going to talk about that again in a little bit. Let's see what happens if they're both negative. X times x, x squared. Outer term negative 5x, inner term negative 5x, so together they make a negative 10x, but a negative 5 times a negative 5 is a positive 25. And again, this can just be written as x minus 5 squared. So notice what doesn't happen here. You can't just square the x and square the 5 because you end up with this middle term when you FOIL. This is a rookie mistake. You all make it. You'll still be making it in Algebra 2. You'll still be making it in pre-calculus. You'll still be making it in calculus. Don't make that mistake. What happens if they are opposites, x times x, x squared? Now my outer term is negative 5x, my inner term is positive 5x, and my last term is negative 5. Now these two cancel each other out, and that's the only time that you end up with that middle term sort of missing, is if these two terms are opposite. If they're the same, you'll always get a middle term. So that's why you can't just square the x and can't just square the 5. Let's do it one more time with 9s. X squared. Outer is going to be 9, inner is going to be 9. Together you make 18x, 9x plus 9x, and then 9 times 9 is 81. So if they're both negative, I'm going to get an x squared, x times x, then a minus 9x is minus 18x, and then a minus 9 times a minus 9 is a plus 81. And then what happens here when they're opposites, x squared, outer term is a negative 9x, inner term is a positive 9x. They cancel each other out. And then a plus 9 times a negative 9 is negative 81. Just remind you that was an x squared plus a 9x minus a 9x minus an 81. These guys cancel because these two signs are opposite. So what's this special pattern? If I have a plus b times a plus b, or a plus b squared, you get a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. You get x squared plus twice these two numbered multiplied together plus this number squared. Now it's a special pattern. I really would never expect you to memorize this, and if you do these enough, you start to see how that works. But they do present it in your textbook, so I want you to see where it comes from. But FOIL will never fail you. So again, a times a is going to give me a squared, and then my outer term and my inner term are going to combine, so I'll have two of them, and then my last term just gets squared because I'm multiplying it by itself. And this is the case where they're opposite. So, and I can't write it as anything squared because they're not the same. So remember, my first two terms, I get a squared, but then my outer term and my inner term cancel, and then all I'm left with is minus b squared. So these are sort of those special products, which if you can see how they work, and that's great. If you just want to FOIL will always work for you. So that's a summary of 9.1 through 9.3.